Here's what no one tells you about your child's so-called bad behavior. It's not bad at all. And the way you respond to it in the next 60 seconds is either going to build your connection with your child or damage it. Let me explain. Every single parent watching this has been there. The tantrum in the grocery store, the defiance when you ask them to do something simple, the backtalk, the refusal to listen. And in those moments, we feel frustrated, embarrassed, maybe even angry. Our instinct is to shut it down, to control it, to make it stop immediately. But here's the truth that changed everything for me and the thousands of families I've worked with. What we call bad behavior is actually communication. It's your child's developing brain trying to tell you something they don't have the words or skills to express yet. And when we respond with punishment, shame, or trying to control them into compliance, we're not teaching them anything useful. We're just teaching them to hide their feelings, to shut down, to stop trusting us with their big emotions. Now, before you think I'm about to tell you to let your kids run wild with no boundaries, hear me out. This isn't about permissive parenting. This isn't about letting your child do whatever they want. This is about something far more powerful. It's about understanding what's really happening in their brain and responding in a way that actually corrects the behavior while building connection and emotional intelligence. In this video, I'm going to break down the psychology and neuroscience behind why children misbehave, what their behavior is really communicating, and most importantly, how to address it in a way that builds respect, cooperation, and a stronger relationship instead of fear and resentment. Because here's what the research shows us. Children who are disciplined with connection instead of control don't just behave better. They actually develop better emotional regulation, stronger problem-solving skills, higher self-esteem, and more secure attachments. But before we dive in, do me a quick favor and hit that subscribe button right now, because here at the Parenting Blueprint, we're all about giving you science-backed strategies that transform your parenting, and I don't want you to miss a single one. So let's talk about what's really going on when your child misbehaves, because once you understand this, everything changes. All right, let's start with what's actually happening inside your child's brain when they're having a meltdown, being defiant or seemingly ignoring everything you say. Because this is where most parents get it completely wrong, and it's not their fault. We've been taught to see behavior through the wrong lens. Here's the key. Your child's brain is not a miniature adult brain. It's fundamentally different in structure and function, especially in the areas responsible for self-control, emotional regulation, and rational thinking. The prefrontal cortex, that's the part of the brain responsible for impulse control, decision-making, understanding consequences, and managing emotions, doesn't fully develop until the mid-20s. In young children, it's barely online at all. This means your 3-year-old literally does not have the brain hardware to think before they act or use their words when they're upset, no matter how many times you tell them to. When your child is in the middle of a tantrum or acting out, their amygdala, the emotional alarm system in the brain, has taken over. This is the part of the brain that detects threats and triggers the fight, flight, or freeze response. And here's what's crucial to understand. To a young child's brain, not getting what they want, feeling misunderstood, or experiencing disappointment can feel like a genuine threat. Their nervous system floods with stress hormones. Their heart rate increases. Blood flow moves away from that logical, thinking brain and into the body to prepare for survival. In this state, they literally cannot access the rational thinking part of their brain. They're not choosing to be difficult. They're having a physiological stress response. Now, when we respond to this with punishment, yelling, timeouts, or trying to force compliance, we're actually making it worse. We're adding more stress to an already overwhelmed nervous system. We're confirming to their brain that they're in danger, that they're alone in their big feelings, and that we're not a safe person to come to when things are hard. And here's what happens over time when this becomes the pattern. Children learn to suppress their emotions, not regulate them. They learn to hide their struggles from us rather than bring them to us. They develop shame around their feelings, and that disconnection, it erodes trust and damages the parent-child relationship in ways that show up later as bigger behavioral problems, secrecy, and emotional distance. But there's another way. And it's actually more effective at changing behavior while simultaneously strengthening your relationship and building emotional intelligence. It's called connection-based discipline, and it's rooted in decades of research on child development, attachment theory, and neuroscience. The core principle is this: children behave better when they feel better, and they feel better when they feel connected, understood, and safe. This doesn't mean you don't have boundaries. It doesn't mean you let them do whatever they want. Boundaries are absolutely essential. Children need them to feel safe and to learn how to function in the world. But the way you enforce those boundaries makes all the difference. Instead of punishing the behavior and shutting down the emotion, you address the emotion first, then guide the behavior. You connect before you correct. You regulate before you educate. And what the research shows is remarkable. Children who are parented this way develop better self-control, show more empathy, have stronger problem-solving skills, and actually cooperate more willingly. Not out of fear, but because they trust their parents and want to maintain that connection. So let's get practical. How do you actually do this in the moment when your child is melting down, refusing to cooperate, or pushing every single button you have? Because I know it sounds nice in theory, but when you're in the thick of it, you need real strategies that work. First, you have to understand that your calm is contagious. This is called co-regulation, and it's one of the most powerful tools you have as a parent. When your child is dysregulated, when they're in that heightened emotional state, they're looking to you to help them regulate. Your nervous system literally communicates with theirs. If you respond with your own dysregulation, yelling, threatening, getting visibly angry, you're just adding fuel to the fire. But if you can stay calm, even when they're losing it, you become the anchor. Your calm nervous system helps their overwhelmed nervous system come back down. Now, I know what you're thinking, but I'm human. I get frustrated too. Absolutely. You don't have to be perfect, but what you do need is to pause. Take a breath. Remind yourself that this is not an emergency. Your child is not giving you a hard time. They're having a hard time. That mindset shift alone changes everything. Here's what it looks like in action. Let's say your 4-year-old refuses to put on their shoes when it's time to leave, and now you're going to be late. Your instinct might be to snap at them, threaten a consequence, or physically force the shoes on. But instead, you pause. You get down on their level. You make eye contact. And you acknowledge what's happening. You really don't want to put your shoes on right now. I get it. You are having so much fun playing and it's hard to stop. That's validation. You're not saying it's okay to refuse. You're just acknowledging their reality. Then you hold the boundary with empathy. And we do need to put shoes on because we're going to school. I can help you, or you can do it yourself. Which would you like? You're giving them some control within the boundary you've set. If they still resist, you stay calm. You might say, I can see this is really hard for you. I'm going to help you. And you calmly, gently help them put their shoes on while staying emotionally connected. You're not punishing. You're not lecturing. You're just holding the boundary while staying regulated yourself. Here's what's happening in this interaction. You're teaching them that their feelings are valid, but that boundaries still exist. You're showing them that you can handle their big emotions without getting overwhelmed yourself. You're demonstrating emotional regulation in real time, and you're maintaining connection even in a moment of conflict. Contrast this with the traditional approach, yelling, threatening, maybe saying something like, "Fine, we're not going to the park later if you don't put your shoes on right now." That might get compliance in the short term, but at what cost? You've just taught them that love is conditional, that their feelings don't matter, and that power and fear are how we get people to cooperate. And here's the thing. Children who are parented with threats and punishment do comply. but only when the threat is present. The moment you're not watching, the moment the punishment isn't hanging over their head, the behavior returns because they haven't internalized the value or lesson. They've just learned to avoid getting in trouble. But children who are parented with connection-based discipline actually internalize the values you're teaching. They develop intrinsic motivation. They cooperate because they want to maintain connection with you, because they trust you, and because they're learning emotional regulation and problem-solving skills that will serve them for life. Now let's talk about some of the most common behavioral challenges parents face and how to handle them with this connection-based approach, because I want you to have a toolkit you can actually use starting today. Let's start with tantrums, because these are the moments that test every parent's patience. Your child is on the floor, screaming, maybe kicking, completely out of control. First thing, remind yourself that this is not manipulation. This is an immature nervous system being completely overwhelmed. Your job is not to stop the tantrum immediately. Your job is to be the calm, safe presence while they ride the wave of emotion. Stay close if they want you close. Give space if they need space, but let them know you're there. You might say quietly, I'm right here. You're safe. I'm not going anywhere. Don't try to reason with them or teach lessons in the middle of the storm. Their thinking brain is offline. They literally cannot process what you're saying. Just be present. Let them feel their feelings fully. And when the storm passes, and it will pass, that's when you reconnect, maybe with a hug, and then you can talk about what happened. What about defiance and backtalk? When your child says no, or you can't make me, or I hate you. It's so easy to take it personally and respond with anger. But remember, they're testing boundaries, trying to assert independence, and they don't yet have the skills to do it respectfully. Instead of punishing the words, address what's underneath. Wow, you're really angry right now. I hear you, and the rule is still that we don't hit. Let's talk about what's making you so upset. You're acknowledging the feeling, holding the boundary, and opening the door for communication. Here's a powerful reframe. Every moment of misbehavior is actually an opportunity. It's an opportunity to teach emotional regulation, problem solving, empathy, and repair. These are the moments where real learning happens, not when everything is going smoothly, but when things are hard. Let's talk about sibling conflict, because this is where parents often feel completely overwhelmed. Your kids are fighting over a toy, screaming at each other, maybe getting physical. The instinct is to jump in, figure out who started it, and punish the guilty party. But here's a better approach. I see two kids who both really want that toy. That's a hard problem. Let's take a break and calm down, and then we'll figure this out together. You're not taking sides. You're not solving it for them. You're helping them calm their nervous systems first, then coaching them through problem solving. Once everyone is calm, you facilitate. Okay, you both want the toy. What are some solutions? Let them come up with ideas. Guide them if needed. Maybe they take turns, maybe they play together, maybe they find a different toy. The point is they're learning to navigate conflict, consider another person's perspective, and find solutions, skills that will serve them their entire lives. And here's something crucial that most parents miss: the repair. When you do lose your patience, and you will because you're human, go back and repair. I'm sorry I yelled earlier. That wasn't okay. I was feeling frustrated, and I didn't handle it well. Let's try that again. This is incredibly powerful. You're modeling accountability, showing them that mistakes can be repaired, and teaching them that relationships can withstand rupture and come back stronger. Children who experience repair learn resilience, forgiveness, and that they're not defined by their worst moments. The goal here isn't perfect behavior. It's not creating compliant robots. The goal is raising emotionally intelligent humans who can regulate themselves, navigate relationships, solve problems, and bounce back from mistakes. And that happens through connection, not control. Let me address something really important here, because I know some of you are thinking, this sounds great, but doesn't this just create entitled kids who think they can do whatever they want? Don't children need consequences? This is probably the biggest misconception about connection-based discipline. So let me be crystal clear. Boundaries and consequences are absolutely essential. Children need them. They crave them, actually, because boundaries create safety and predictability in a world that often feels chaotic and overwhelming. The difference is in how we implement those consequences. Traditional discipline often relies on arbitrary punishments that have nothing to do with the behavior. Taking away screen time because they didn't clean their room, for example, or timeouts that isolate them when they're already emotionally overwhelmed. These punishments might change behavior in the moment through fear or shame, but they don't teach the skills we actually want children to develop. They don't teach problem-solving, empathy, or how to make better choices next time. Natural and logical consequences, delivered with empathy and connection, are far more effective. A natural consequence happens automatically. If you don't wear a coat, you get cold. A logical consequence is directly related to the behavior. If you throw your toy, the toy gets put away for a while. Here's the key. You deliver these consequences calmly, without anger or lectures, while maintaining connection. I see you threw the toy. That tells me you're done playing with it right now. We'll try again later. You're not punishing, you're simply following through with a logical outcome, and you're doing it while staying emotionally available. And here's what research shows. Children actually learn better from consequences when they're delivered with empathy rather than anger. When there's shame and disconnection attached to the consequence, children's brains go into defense mode. They focus on the unfairness, on how mean you're being, on justifying their behavior. The lesson gets lost. But when you deliver a consequence with empathy, I know you're disappointed. This is hard. And this is what happens when we make that choice. Their brain stays open to learning. They can actually process the connection between their behavior and the outcome. And if this approach is resonating with you, take a second and hit that like button, because I want to make sure this message reaches as many parents as possible who are ready for a better way. Now let's talk about consistency, because this is where a lot of parents struggle. You try this gentler approach for a day or two, don't see immediate results, and think it's not working. So you go back to yelling, threatening, and traditional punishment. Here's the truth. Behavior change takes time. If your child is used to a certain pattern of interaction with you, they're going to test whether this new approach is real. They're going to push boundaries harder before things get better. This is actually normal and expected. Think about it from their perspective. If you've been responding with anger and punishment, and suddenly you're calm and empathetic, they're confused. They're going to escalate to see if the old response is still there, to see if this new version of you is trustworthy. This is where most parents give up. They think, see? Being gentle doesn't work. They just walk all over me. But you're right at the breakthrough point. If you can stay consistent, calm, connected, clear boundaries, they will learn that this is the new normal, and the behavior will shift. The research on this is clear. It typically takes 2 to 3 weeks of consistent new patterns before you start seeing significant behavior change. That might feel like forever when you're in the trenches, but compare that to years of power struggles, disconnection, and repeated misbehavior with traditional discipline. Let me share something with you that I think will really drive this home. There's groundbreaking research from Dr. Dan Siegel and Dr. Tina Payne Bryson, authors of The Whole Brain Child, that looked at how different discipline approaches affect brain development over time. What they found is that harsh, punitive discipline actually impairs the development of the prefrontal cortex, that part of the brain responsible for self-control and good decision-making that we want our children to develop. When children are repeatedly disciplined with fear, shame, and disconnection, their brains become wired for survival mode rather than learning mode. But children who experience connection-based discipline, where boundaries are clear but delivered with empathy and emotional attunement, show stronger development in the prefrontal cortex, better emotional regulation, and more advanced social skills. Their brains are literally wiring differently because of how we respond to their behavior. Another powerful study followed children from preschool into their 20s. The children whose parents used more authoritative parenting, that's high warmth with clear boundaries, showed better outcomes across every measure: academic achievement, mental health, social relationships, and even physical health. The children whose parents used authoritarian parenting, that's low warmth with rigid control, showed significantly worse outcomes in all these areas. So when you choose connection over control, you're not just making today easier, you're shaping the trajectory of your child's entire life. You're building the neural pathways for emotional intelligence, resilience, empathy, and self-regulation that will serve them in every relationship, every challenge, and every decision they face. Now, I want to acknowledge something important. This approach requires more from you as a parent. It's actually harder in the short term to stay calm and connected when your child is pushing every button you have. It would be easier to just yell, threaten, or punish and move on. But here's what I've seen in my work with thousands of families. Parents who make this shift consistently tell me that while it's harder at first, it becomes so much easier over time. The power struggles decrease, the cooperation increases, the relationship gets stronger, and parenting becomes more joyful instead of constantly feeling like a battle. You're not just managing behavior anymore. You're building a human. You're teaching skills that will last a lifetime. You're creating a relationship where your child actually wants to come to you with their problems, their mistakes, their struggles, because they trust that you'll help them navigate it rather than shame them for it. And that trust, that's everything. Because when they're teenagers facing peer pressure, when they're young adults making major life decisions, when they're parents themselves someday, that foundation of trust and connection you're building right now will be the thing that keeps them grounded, keeps them coming back to you, and gives them the emotional tools to thrive. So the next time your child is having a meltdown, refusing to cooperate, or testing every limit you set, remember, this is not bad behavior that needs to be crushed. This is communication from a developing human who doesn't yet have all the skills they need. Your job is not to control them into compliance. Your job is to stay calm, stay connected, hold your boundaries with empathy, and teach them the skills they're missing. They don't need you to be perfect. They need you to be present. They don't need you to have all the answers. They need you to be willing to stay in the hard moments with them. And they don't need you to fix everything immediately. They need you to believe in their capacity to grow, to learn, and to become the amazing human they're meant to be. Because here's the truth. When they feel safe, they listen. When they feel understood, they cooperate. When they feel connected, they learn. And when you parent from a place of connection instead of control, you're not just changing behavior, you're changing lives.